Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series and the return of the Canton and Simi show. I'm very happy to be joined, of course, by Harry Simi. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, all good, mate. Not too bad. Currently fighting hay fever. Got the fan on
Mm.
in the background, trying to stay cool as well. Not that I'm complaining about the weather. Let's get that clear. But when you're sitting in here trying to record a podcast, it can get a little bit hot under the collar. Should we say it that way? How
Yeah,
about you?
no, it
How's it going?
is. Yeah, not bad. I just got back from playing some evening golf, and it meant that obviously all of the grass, because I lost about 4 balls, so I'm constantly looking for them and trudging through the rough. It's got all up my nose, so I'm equally as stuffy. It's fair to say, but no, it's good to see you. Good to be back. We haven't done one of these collab shows in a while, and if listeners remember, we did one of our tier list videos back midway through the season where we kind of rated the players so far. I think it was 2/3 maybe through the season, and we rated the players so far to that point. And I thought that we would kind of rekindle that for a impromptu 8 a.m. This is being pre-recorded and it's going out tomorrow or today, as when you listen to this at 8 a.m. because I'm in the office, so I can't do the usual 8 a.m. live show. But we didn't want to leave you without a show, so this is going out to you live. And what we thought we would do is our tier list in a transfer special style, if you like. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be ranking whether we think the likelihood, if you like, of the players that we're going to be linked to and have been linked to. And we're going to be categorizing them into different. We'll also have a quick chat about each player as well and our thoughts on them as potential targets too. But it's going to go something like this. In the top row, we've got "Here We Go." Thank you, Fab. We're stealing your your saying for this. We got "Very Good Chance," "Could Happen," "Unlikely," and "No Chance" are the options that we've got now. Me and Harry did sit before we went live trying to think of any other players that we've been linked to, and we know that inevitably you guys are going to think of some while you're watching this. Leave them down in the comment section below and then put them in the categories which you would have put them in. And also, of course, for those watching, you can always leave your comments down below. Whilst this is being premiered as well and you're in the chat box, make sure you're throwing in where you would put certain players. So we'll kick off with the defenders, and Ivan Fresneda is the first. Harry, where would you like to put him?
I want to put him in unlikely. I just,
Okay.
this is a player that's been talked about with regards to Arsenal for a long, long time. I just think this isn't an impossible deal to do. I think he's playing at Valladolid, who obviously, if I'm not mistaken, got relegated. So, that just feels to me like if it was a deal that Arsenal really wanted to do, they could do it easily. I don't think it would cost more than probably 20, 25 million euros max, maybe less now that Valladolid have gone down. And I just don't feel that Arsenal are as interested in this player as some would have you believe. I don't know what you think about it, but I just think this is one that if we really wanted it last window, where it was a possibility and it was being talked about, we could have made it happen. We didn't force the issue, in my opinion, because the interest isn't necessarily that strong. I don't know what you think about this.
Well, this is interesting because I've actually reported that we do have an interest in the player because, that's what I've been told is that the interest from Arsenal is there and has been there since January. That said, there's always obviously the likelihood. I'm just going to get a cup of water here. Thank you very much. Just in regard to kind of Fresneda, I agree with you. I feel like it's a deal that if we could do it, why haven't they done it? Sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I think that maybe a reason for that is because there's so much emphasis at the moment and talk on the Declan Rice situation that maybe that's taking things away. Dortmund are far and away the favourites right now, and certainly are trying to push to complete a deal for Fresneda. But I think I'm inclined to put this in between kind of unlikely and could happen. I think it's kind of halfway between those two. The interest is certainly there. But I think Arsenal are looking potentially at other players at the moment and considering alternatives, as we've heard in the last couple of days even or so, and we'll come on to some of those players. Sasha Bowie, Galatasaray fullback. I'm putting him in at the moment, and I'll get your thoughts on him, into the no chance because we've reported at Football.London that the interest that's coming out of Turkey is very much on the players' side driven, and that from the Arsenal side of things, there isn't a suggestion that Arsenal are looking to move for Bowie. So, but give me your thoughts on Bowie and what little maybe you've seen of him in Galatasaray shirt.
Haven't seen an awful lot of him, but I think that looking at the way Arsenal have moved in the transfer market over the last couple of seasons, when spending significant-ish amounts of money, they've wanted to get players that they know are going to come in and improve the side instantly. And for all the raving reviews about Sacha Boey, he is playing in the Turkish league, and let's be honest, the standard is not where it needs to be to guarantee that he could come into the Premier League and deliver. And the price that's being talked about, 20 plus million, I've heard 25 million, all sorts of crazy numbers being thrown about. I think that to Arsenal, this would represent a huge risk. And so, given that we're in that next phase of the build where I feel like we're looking at the squad this summer and going, right, what do we need? We need to take it to the next level. We need players that are ready made for today and not necessarily solutions for tomorrow. I think we're past that phase. I think we took a couple of risks in the last couple of summers. Lokonga being one of them hasn't really worked out. Tavares being one of them hasn't really worked out. Fabio Vieira, quite a big risk in what we paid for him, hasn't really worked out yet, although I'm not ruling him out just yet. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I don't think we're at that phase anymore where we're going to be taking punts on people. And to go and spend upwards of 20, 25 million pounds on this player wouldn't make sense to me. So I'm going to put it in no chance as well. I agree with you.
Fair enough. Yeah, lovely stuff. Moving then to Timothy Castagna. We did our tactical breakdown on Castagna on Tuesday. We had Sasha Tavaleri on the show who broke the news regarding Arsenal's interest in the Belgian. Did suggest that Fresneda was ahead of him in the options, and then also told us that he's very keen on a potential move to Arsenal. But where would you put this in terms of likelihoods this summer?
I'd put this in could happen. I think he's somebody that ticks a few boxes in that he's quite versatile. We know that he can play from both sides. It would very much be an addition to the squad. And this reminds me of the Jorginho signing, if you like.
Yeah.
Someone that could come in, that could plug a gap for you when you need them to, but you'd be doing it all along knowing that this wasn't the end goal. This wasn't where you wanted to end up, or the player you wanted to end up landing on in your fullback positions. It's someone who could serve a purpose in the short term. You know, I've seen Arsenal fans comparing him to Cedric Suarez and saying he's of that kind of level. I think what a lot of people have forgotten about Timothy Castagna is that prior to moving to Leicester, he was a really good player for Atalanta.
Yeah.
And even at the beginning of his Leicester City career, I thought he looked really, really good. As a collective, they've struggled. And so I'm reluctant to pin all of that on Timothy Castagna, although agreed his individual level has dropped a little bit lately. But I think he's experienced. I think he could plug a hole. And I think this is one that Arsenal will keep on the back burner, just like they did with Jorginho. And if they fail to get in somebody who's higher up the priority list, like they failed to land Caicedo, for example, in January, they could turn to him. So I think this could happen.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like a very Arsenal signing, actually, Castagna. So I wasn't surprised when the links popped up. He was a player that when he was at Atalanta, I wanted at Arsenal. And what he was producing there was really good. For Belgium, he started the last, I think, 7 games for a side that were ranked #1 in the world. You know, and I know that the options in those fullback areas aren't, say, there's not loads of depth there. But, he's still starting those games. He's trusted by the coaches there and has continued to do so. So I like the player. I think he would offer, having Tomiyasu and Castagna in your backline options gives you a lot of coverage. A lot of options if you want to change things, rotate players out. And he's of Premier League quality, 27 now. You're going to get some really good years from him if you sign him, but the price I think could have to be right. Mohamed Simakan, RB Leipzig, can play right back, can play centre back. What have you made of this one?
I'm going to put this in unlikely. I'm not going to say no chance because I think there is a quality player there. So I don't think it's ridiculous to think that Arsenal could potentially move for him. I think he's got much more credit in the bank than Sacha Boey, for example, who we discussed and put in the no chance sort of section. I don't know that Arsenal are going to spend that kind of money, the kind of money that RB Leipzig are talking about on a centre-back. I think the priority was to get Saliba to sign his contract, and the priority is to bring in full-back cover that would allow Ben White to go back inside Jakub Kiwior, grew into the team, I thought, at the back end of the season as well. So he's another option at centre back. And all of a sudden, you got 4 options, not even including Tomiyasu, who will be back at some point as well. So I think this one is unlikely. Good player, quite like him, but I don't think this is one for this summer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the links that we saw at the beginning of the window, I think it was Ed Aarons of The Guardian suggested Arsenal got interest in the player, but they have kind of disappeared completely, very quickly. There was no subsequent links, where Fresneda, for instance, we've seen, persistent links, and, certainly that hasn't dropped in terms of what I've heard on that sense. And other players, have not dipped away either. Think of some of the midfielders have been linked to as well. They've not dipped. They've been continually talked about, whereas Simakan has kind of gone off the radar somewhat. Manchester City's Joao Cancelo. What do you think about this one?
Could happen.
Yeah.
I really do think that Arsenal want to do this deal. I really, really do. Whether they'll be able to do it or not remains to be seen, because I think financially this is quite a difficult one to do. We know that there was a sort of option to buy available to Bayern for around about 60 million euros, if I've got that right off the top of my head. And we know that Bayern don't want to take that up, which suggests that, Manchester City are of the belief that this player is worth money. And he absolutely is. I think if you rewind a year and a half ago, people were talking about Joao Cancelo as maybe the best fullback in world football. We talked about Castagna being able to play on both sides. Cancelo can do that. And in terms of being able to play that inverted role because of his quality on the ball, he would be a really, really good fit. But it's going to cost money, to get him off of a rival. And City do see us as that now. I don't think they're going to be letting people move across to Arsenal as freely as they did last summer, looking at sort of the way that elevated us. And I think his wage demands are going to be big as well. Personally, if we've got the money, I would do this deal, because I think this just adds a whole new level to that back line, and a lot of quality, a lot of experience. People are concerned about the way he sort of fell out with Pep Guardiola. I mean, people clash. That's life, and if Mikel Arteta knows him well enough to think that, he'd be a good fit, then I'm on board with that as well. Not going to say it's a very good chance, because again, I think the finances could be an issue here, but it certainly could happen, because I believe that there is a want to do this deal from Arsenal's side. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, I do tend to agree. I think that the interest from Arsenal has been well documented over the last few weeks or so. It's certainly got the indications of a deal that Arsenal have genuine interest in. It's very Arsenal in 2022-23. Obviously Arsenal went and moved for Zinchenko, and Jesus got them in. There's further suggestions to other Manchester City players we'll talk about as well. And he fits the mould of a fullback that Arteta likes, that can play that inverted role. It is a bit of a bummer for Zinchenko. He kind of left City to escape Cancelo and finds himself now at a club where maybe he plays with. I think a lot of people have asked the question about, if you sign Cancelo, what does that mean for Zinchenko? Well, for me, I think that there are games where you can play both fullbacks that are more offensive. Some people have suggested that you can't because it's too unbalanced. But actually, I think when you're at home and you're playing against teams in the lower end of the table and you're going to have more of the ball, Liverpool won a title with Robertson and Trent, as their 2 fullbacks. They didn't see any balance issues there. If you use the right system, you've got the right other players to complement them, you can play with 2 offensive fullbacks. Arsenal have done it and had done it for years. So it's
Imagine as well, you've got Declan Rice in midfield who can drop in alongside Thomas Partey, and that can become a double defensive midfield pivot if you need it to in certain game states. Because I think Declan Rice defensively is better than Granit Xhaka. I think that Xhaka did a wonderful job, but Rice would give us that extra bit of stability if indeed that deal gets done. So I agree with you. I think that balance can work.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Moving on to the last defender on this list, unless I miraculously remember one that we've forgotten later on. Mark Gahey, Crystal Palace centre-half, linked with Arsenal towards the beginning of the window. Not necessarily heard too many links of late. What do you make of this one?
No chance for me. I quite like the player. I commentated on a fair few Crystal Palace games over the course of last season, and I always thought he looked pretty good alongside Joachim Andersen. I thought that Palace, for all their issues under Patrick Vieira, which ultimately led to his sacking, always looked quite good defensively and were able to stay in games. They just couldn't score, and that was a big, big problem for them. I like the player. I think he's got a lot of potential, but this is one that I believe is just going to be not worthwhile in terms of what Crystal Palace are going to demand. And I think that they're trying to build something at Crystal Palace. Don't really know what the managerial situation is going to be there. I don't see them selling him for anything that I would be comfortable with paying for somebody like Mark Guehi. So for me, no chance at the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the price tag was suggested at something like £50 million that Crystal Palace wanted, and that just I can't see Arsenal spending 50 million on a defender this summer. I know that they want defenders, but I mean, and if they do, it would likely be a player of the caliber of Cancelo if they were going to spend that amount of money, which I think even, maybe Man City would sell him for less. But Guehi, I just can't see, that happening. Maybe if Saliba had not signed his contract, we may have seen movement in that area, but with obviously Saliba's renewal, I think that is much, it's far less likely. Moving into the midfielders then, Declan Rice. Oh, I wonder where we're going to put this guy. Where are you putting him?
Here we go, baby. Here we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, I think this is happening. I think that, we've heard a lot about it over the last few weeks. There's been a lot of suggestions that talks are ongoing, a lot of reports saying that the talks are progressing well. We heard yesterday from The Guardian, I think it was, that a sort of an agreement had been found in terms of what Arsenal were going to pay, which included add-ons that would take it over £100 million. I just think everybody seems to be reporting that Declan Rice wants Arsenal. It feels like we really want him. And we've also heard, sort of just before recording this, from a number of outlets in Germany that the likes of Bayern, for example, are pulling out of the race. And it just feels like it's all heading in one direction. So fingers crossed we get this done nice and early. I know, now is still very early in the window. And I would say to people, don't panic if you don't hear of this being done in the next couple of weeks. But you know what fans are like, and you know that that's going to happen. So here we go. Hopefully we can wrap this one up nice and quickly and move on to another target. You're on mute, Tom.
My bad. There was like a helicopter outside. I was muting for the politeness of our listeners and then still managed to forget. No, I think you summed it up perfectly. Declan Rice is... I keep looking back at his FBref profile and seeing some of the statistics from his last season, and they're just out of this world. Like, the level of defensive security that he's going to bring to that midfield position is great. Yes, I know that there's suggestions that he could play like slightly ahead of Partey, for instance. We don't have to drop Partey and you could play him where Xhaka's played. And I think you can. I think he's got the technical ability to be able to do that. The goal he scored against Ghent in the UEFA Conference League, I think, demonstrates, what he's able to do on the ball. Maybe people have underestimated. And I think that as well, Arteta, as a coach, is going to get a lot out of him. He's been playing under, if we're honest, some, I don't want to say questionable coaches always, because Manuel Pellegrini was at West Ham not so long ago. But I think David Moyes, even though he won the Conference League, if I was in charge of West Ham, I'd move him on. I'd say, you've done a brilliant job this season, David Moyes. You've won us a trophy. But to finish where they finished in the Premier League, with the likes of Scamacca and Rice and Paqueta and, all the talent that they had in that West Ham team, they massively underachieved in the Premier League. And I would move on to a coach that I think could get more out of that team. And for that reason, I would still move David Moyes on. And I think that Arteta is going to be able to get so much out of Rice.
I do have one small concern about Declan Rice, which you can't say at the moment because everybody will go into meltdown and defense mode if you say it. But I'm going to say it anyway because I feel like I have to get this off my chest. I feel like one of the things I'm a little bit worried about is Declan Rice getting the ball off the centre backs if he needs to, and being able to deal with the aggressive press that we sometimes face from sides. And the reason I say that is because I think at West Ham, a lot of the time you are sitting behind the ball and you don't take that many risks in terms of your positioning. And there's very few situations when playing in a David Moyes side where you are one-on-one with someone and the rest of your team have taken up such a shape that means that if you lose the ball, they are in. And I think that level of pressure that comes with the way we want to play and the bravery we show in our build-up is something that Declan Rice, I'm not saying can't do, but will need to get used to, because West Ham are always set up in a very rigid way, in a very safe way. And I think he's always got that bit of protection in and around him. It's been with Thomas Souček quite a bit. If he, for example, plays as the 6 for Arsenal from time to time, we've seen how isolated Thomas Partey can be because of how high up the centre-halves push or because of the risks that they take in pinging the ball into him. So I'm not saying he can't do it, but he's got a
Yeah.
very different job here.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. Yeah, what I would point to is obviously when he plays for England, and starts for England with a lot of high quality players around him there. We do often see maybe more so his responsibility he has of being that deeper soul number 6 when you've got two. I know that sometimes when Jordan Henderson is alongside him, it's less so. But when England decide to go with two more number 8 style players, I think actually what we see is a lot more from him. That said, Calvin Phillips started alongside him quite a lot, so at the same time, maybe he gets a little bit of reprieve there. But I think there is so much to be unlocked still from Declan Rice in terms of what Arteta can bring. Moving on to the next one, and our other high-profile target of the summer, Caicedo. Am I right in putting maybe very good chance rather than here we go?
I would put could happen. I don't think
Really?
this is a very good chance of this. And the reason I don't
Interesting.
think there's a very good chance, and feel free to put it where you want, but
Yeah.
I just can't see Arsenal. And we've had this conversation before over WhatsApp.
Yeah.
I cannot see a world at this moment in time where Arsenal commit close to £200 million just on their midfield. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I really do. I hope I'm wrong. And I hope they do, because I think this guy is a top player and could be as impactful, if not more, over the longer term than Declan Rice. I really, really do. But there's a part of me that feels like it's one or the other because of the money involved. And, KSE have done a fantastic job in recent times of investing at a time where we didn't have Champions League football to try and get us there. But they will want to return to a self-sustaining model sooner rather than later. I'm not saying it's going to be this summer, but things are going to have to start balancing out somewhere along the line. And I think they may look at a cheaper alternative to help out with Declan Rice rather than go big on those two. I know everybody wants to see Caicedo in the midfield, but I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying it's one of those where until I see it, I'm going to be reluctant to believe it. I don't know what you think.
I respect the held back approach, if you like. But I'm here to tell you, Harry, that I think it can happen as well. That's why I've put him in between very good chance and could happen. I'll put him in between the two to balance things out. I think that Arsenal have shown in the way they approached the Caicedo deal in January with those £70 million bid that they put in, still knowing that Declan Rice was their dream signing for the summer, and they knew they couldn't get him in January. They still put that £70 million in for Caicedo. And I think that is the first sign for me that demonstrates that they're very, very keen on getting both. I think that the noises that are coming out from this deal is certainly that Arsenal are confident on Rice, but that has not cooled any interest in Caicedo. But no, I don't blame you for your reservations because, as you pointed out, the idea of Arsenal spending close to £200 million on two players is just so alien to us that, we haven't broken our transfer record since 2019. Since 2019 when we brought in Pepe. And the idea that we would bring in two players that would both break that record in one window 4 years later, it does seem surreal. But I think that there is scope there. For me, and I've talked about this before, and I know we talked about it in our WhatsApp group with Potsy as well, is that in my view, this summer we have to go big in terms of upwards of £200 million, maybe more than £250 million to do what we need to do in this window, so that in the future windows we can be self-sufficient, that we can aim for that self-sufficiency. Where you look at what Man City did last summer, they made a profit. They brought in Erling Haaland, Calvin Phillips, Sergio Gomez, and they made a profit in that window in terms of transfers. And we can get to that. We can absolutely get to that. But in this window, we're going to make a loss again in terms of players. But it has to be the last real window where, in my view, we're making that big loss. Because in the next summers to come, we should be adding between 1 and 3 players, and then other players are going to move on. You are going to sell your Nketiahs. You are probably some players that are, Smith Rowe could move on in the future if he doesn't have a good season. Fabio Vieira might be moved on at a reduced price. We will see players moved on. There could be youngsters that come through that impress, that, make a fair bit of money as well. Gabriel Jesus, if Arsenal choose to go for a centre forward, you never know, could be on the end of a sale. Manchester City weren't averse to it, and they're the team that we're trying to match. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Arsenal do move on players that you look at now and say, I can't ever see them moving them on. But that has happened. That I couldn't ever see Smith Rowe leaving, but so many suggestions were before the summer that he could. And yeah, obviously we found out from David Ornstein that that's not going to be the case, at least not at the moment. Let's move to Ilkay Gundogan, who would be on a free. Manchester City, Barcelona, and Saudi Arabia are said to be the other parties involved. Where are you putting this one?
Could happen.
Okay.
Again, much like Cancelo, I'd be all over this. I know people keep saying
Yeah.
he's 32, and people keep saying, "Oh, we don't want another
Oh,
Manchester
who are
City
these
reject."
people?
It's mad. This thing about we don't want another Manchester City reject. The two Manchester City rejects that we brought in last summer helped elevate us to a title challenge. So I'm not having that. I can understand the PTSD when it comes to Chelsea players, not Man City though. So I would be all over this. I think Ilkay Gundogan, I think it works in our favor that they've just won the treble, because he might feel like it's the perfect time to draw a line under his Man City career. What more can you do? What more can you achieve at Manchester City? Barcelona, for all the interest, for me, I'm never convinced they have the finances. And I'm never convinced this day and age that they can compete with one of the big Premier League clubs on that front. If we really want a player, I think we can get in ahead of them. My concern is that Manchester City tie him down to a new contract. That's the bit I worry about. But again, yeah, the wages might be quite high, but if you're not paying a fee for him, you can kind of make that work. So I would look to do this one. And this is where I say that we might not go massive in midfield. If we brought in Gundogan and Rice, I think, that would
That's
be,
great.
that would be a way of improving things without having to spend 200 million, maybe spending, I don't know, say we spend 100 on Rice, maybe it'll be 125, 130 based on what you're going to pay Gundogan over the 3-year term that he's probably going to want. So, yeah, I for me, it's one that could happen. It's one that Arsenal are at least keeping on their radar.
Yeah.
But whether it comes to anything, I'm not
Do you
sure. But I
think
wouldn't.
Arteta would rather have Gundogan than Caicedo this summer?
I think in the short term, probably.
Yeah.
I think that he's such an intelligent player, Ilkay Gundogan. He's so clutch. We've seen it over the last couple of seasons. He really turns up when it matters at the end of a campaign. Very, very an intelligent footballer who can, again, we talk about versatility in midfield. Want to stick him up behind the forward, he can do that. Want to stick him as an 8, he can do that. Want to play him that little bit deeper to control the tempo, I think he can do that as well. I think that Arteta feels like Arsenal are on the cusp right now, and is probably of the mindset that I'm of at the moment, which is we've got to make this count now and not be obsessed by the future all the time. Yes, we want to build and we want to provide that pathway and bring in players from time to time that are longer term investments. And if you clarify what they are from the start, then maybe there isn't that pressure on them. But I think having missed out so narrowly this season, he'll want to take that next step, and he'll want to take it now. And Ilkay Gundogan is someone that could really help him with that, I think.
Agreed. Next one is Martin Zubimendi of Real Sociedad. Obviously, Arsenal were interested in him in January. There were suggestions that Arsenal were even willing to pay the 45 million euro release clause, but he was keen to stay and finish the season. Now, there are some, I don't know if you've read this, but there are some quotes that came out yesterday from him saying that he would rather be Asia Illarramendi's replacement as a number 6 at La Real than Sergio Busquets' replacement at Barcelona. So I think it kind of tells you where his head's at. And I think this is probably a no chance. What do you think?
Yeah, I would probably put it unlikely, but
Yeah.
just because the links have been there for so long, it makes you feel like there is something in it. But at the same time, again, going back to what I said about Fresneda earlier on, if we really wanted this, if we were really all in on this, I think we
Mm.
could have forced the issue, and we didn't. And I know he's going to publicly say that he wants to be at Real Sociedad because it's his club. And I get that. Just like Declan Rice was on film the other day saying that he's only West Ham. Come on. What you say in public, is not often, or is not always
Mm.
the real truth. And especially when you love a club, even if you do feel like it's time to move on, you're not going to go and slag off that club, and you're not going to go and put them in that position if unless you're feeling like you need to force the move. And I don't think Zubimendi at this time feels that way. I would say it's unlikely. The reason I wouldn't say no chance is just because those links have been there for what feels like an age, which makes you think there's something
Yeah.
in it.
Fair enough. James Maddison. Arsenal do have, according to David Ornstein, an interest in bringing in an attacking / creative midfielder this window. And Maddison has, of course, been one of the players linked. Leicester are said to want upwards of £50 million this summer to sign him. What do you make of this one?
For me, no chance.
Mm.
No chance. I don't think he fits. I don't think he's as good as people make him out to be. I think he's a good player, but I don't think
Oh,
he's a.
Potsy's crying.
Let him cry. Let him cry. Potsy told us that Granit Xhaka was no good for years as well. So,
True, yeah.
But look, I think that James Maddison is a good player, but he's not at the elite level. And if he was, he wouldn't have still been at Leicester City come the end of this season, in my opinion. I think somebody would have broken the bank and got him earlier. Leicester have had financial troubles for the best part of 18 to 24 months now. And if someone really wanted to test their resolve for Maddison, I'm sure they could have and would have got a hold of him. Nobody did, because I don't think he is of the Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, Man United level. I think he's in the bracket below your Tottenhams, your Newcastles, et cetera, in terms of where those clubs are at. So, yeah, no chance for me. And I wouldn't spend what Leicester are going to be asking for James Maddison. I just don't think he's worth it. Gives a cracking interview, and that seems to blind people. But in terms of him on the pitch, I just don't see it, mate. I've never been on board with this idea. I don't know about you.
I would take him. I'd be interested to see if he could take that step. I think for me, the big question mark is about price. You know, £50 million is a lot of money for a player, and especially since he's been relegated. You know, if I was a club looking at Leicester and saying you've got relegated, I don't know how long Maddison's left on his contract. Do you know off the top of your heads?
I don't. I can check while you're
I'm
speaking.
just going on Transfermarkt. Yeah, I mean, if a club like Leicester going down, I think it runs out in 24, so he's got a year left. 50 million quid is a lot. I would have said, if you're Leicester, accept 30 million pounds. You know, you've gone down to the Championship. I don't see where, and that's why they lost Tielemans on a free, because their valuation was far too high for a player with a year left. And then in January, they still had a £20 million valuation on the player, and he had 6 months left. And they lost him for nothing in the end, and it didn't matter because he had a really bad end to the season anyway. And I just feel as though James Maddison is, again, and he's got his injury issues too. So if it was 30 million, I think, yeah, 50 million, no, I'm not willing to risk that amount of money on James Maddison.
There are a lot of players that fall into that category for me this summer, where I go, if the price is right, I would take them. But there's not many that I look at and I go, well, I would pay anything for you. I feel like I've been able to put players in price brackets.
Price has gone mad though recently.
Yeah.
Like the price as a player has just gone. And I mean, I understand what you're saying. But do you think there's a part of it that is us, that maybe we need to adjust how we think about the value of players because of how the market is now?
Probably. I mean, just an example. Like, obviously, there's talk of Kylian Mbappe leaving, right? And there's talk that PSG won about £150 million, and people say, "Well, that's crazy." But I think, like, someone like that, you can justify it because you will get back a fair amount of that in terms of commercial value. And I think there's a lot of these things that come into it, like Declan Rice being an England international pushes his value up because he's one of the faces of this England side. And what that brings you commercially is massive. Look how adored Bukayo Saka is, Aaron Ramsdale is, all of that. I think there's other value that you can find in players outside of just their monetary value in terms of what you pay for them. But I agree with you that the prices have gone mental. And I think maybe it is our state of mind where we need to just let go a little bit and say, well, to a Premier League club, what is 15, 20 million pounds between what we think they're worth and what the club are about to pay? Is it really the end of the world? And maybe it's not. And maybe we're just old.
Maybe we are just old, which is a horrible feeling. Xavi Simons, PSV, wonder kid. PSG, of course, have this buyback clause that said Xavi Simons has gone on record a number of times, kind of not rubbishing the idea of returning, but he's not exactly sounded keen on the idea of returning to PSG. What do you make of this link? Because I really like him as a player.
I like him as a player. I think he'd be a good fit. But the likelihood of this for me is not very high. I would put this in unlikely. I just look at what we have at the club at the moment, and what we've seen is the system develop over the course of the campaign to being one that has a 6 and 2 8s. I think at times we needed to be a little bit more flexible in that, and we needed to be able to revert to 2 6s and an 8, or 2 6s and a 10 when we were playing certain fixtures, and we didn't necessarily have the ideal personnel to do that. Xhaka could tuck in alongside Partey, but we know that defensively and sort of in that type of area of the pitch was where Granit Xhaka sometimes came unstuck. And then we'd push the left back on, and it would just be, for me, it would be nice to have a little bit more flexibility in the system. And Xavi Simons for me doesn't really add to what we have, because we have Odegaard, we have Smith Rowe, who you mentioned, who's probably in his last chance saloon, you feel, this season to deliver. Otherwise, he could move on. But I also don't think the club internally just yet have given up on Fabio Vieira, who's another player that fits into that bracket for me. So I think because of the options we have, the likelihood of us spending significant money on Xavi Simons, it's just not there for me. People have been talking about Mason Mount, and I know he's Man United bound and all of that. But the reason that one to me was different to the Simmons one because Mount could do that defensive work as well if you needed him to. And so he ticked an additional box. I'm not saying he's a better player, but in terms of giving you that versatility and flexibility, he had a little bit more of that. Xavi Simons, for me, wonderful footballer, but where he fits into this equation, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think that the thing about Xavi Simons is the benefit of him is his versatility, and I think he can play right wing, can play left wing, can play centre forward in a false nine role, can play attacking midfield, and I think he would be a great option as a competitor to Bukayo Saka. With us re-signing Reece Nelson to a new deal, you question why would you bring in a winger maybe if you're re-signing him and you see a future for him, but I think Xavi Simons, his versatility to play all those areas, makes him an asset. I think PSV would want similar money that they got to Cody Gakpo to sell him, unless, of course, he agreed to go back to PSG for that measly 12 million euros, I think it is, which is a ludicrously low amount of money. But I think Xavi Simons is kind of in control of that. And if he doesn't want to go to PSG, he doesn't have to. So that's one to keep an eye on.
That's interesting because I don't really see him as a wide player. I know he has played there and can technically, but when I watch him, I see Martin Odegaard. I see someone Odegaard maybe a bit more defensive in the sense of like he drops into deeper positions and all of that.
Yeah.
But I think Simons' best position for me is in the midfield trio, and that's why I don't think he fits. But if you, I'd admit I haven't seen an awful lot. So if you think he can play wide, it's different.
Well, this season he's played the most of his games. He's played on the left. He's played 19 games on the left. He's played 17 games through the middle in attacking midfield. He's played 5 games at centre forward and 6 games at right wing, according to Transfermarkt. And his best return has come where you say centrally. In those 17 games, he got 11 goals and 4 assists. At left wing, he got, in the 19 games, 7 goals and 6 assists. So he got 2 more assists, but 4 less goals than he got at attacking midfield. On centre forward, he got 2 goals, 2 assists in 5 games and 2 goals in the games that he played at right wing. So he returned 34 goal contributions in 48 games, which is a brilliant return. Like, that is, especially considering the guy is 20. It's an amazing return. I think he is one of the most talented players on the continent. But go on.
Do you think that Cody Gakpo's departure had an impact on his adjustment in
Raising
position?
the level.
And maybe it freed him up. I don't know if he scored more goals.
Yeah, I'm looking at
he
played more on the left after Gakpo left. Yeah. And if you look, he then obviously that's when he started getting the goals and the assists. So in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, sorry for the helicopter in the background, 13, 14, 15 games, he played bar 2, maybe 3, all on the left, and he got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 goal contributions in those games. So, yes, you're absolutely right. But at the start of the season, when Gakpo was in the team, in the first 4 games, he got 6 goals and 2 assists. So he was averaging 2 goal contributions a game playing centrally. So I think the scope is there for him. I think at Arsenal it would be a great option. But I agree with you in terms of where we're ranking him. I think unlikely at the moment, just because I think Arsenal's attentions are all in terms of the midfield, central midfield, in terms of Rice, Caicedo, etc. And then I think they want a fullback next. And then they'll, if they think that they've got time and money and resources left, I think that's when they'll move to the kind of attacking midfield or attacking player. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Speaking of attacking players, and I may have hinted to where we think most of these are going to go, but we'll see. Samuel, I added this during the show because I remembered one. Samuel Chukwueze, recently linked this week with a move to the club via Real, Nigerian international. What do you think about this?
For me, no chance. I've seen flashes of him and thought he looks brilliant, but he still looks a bit raw for me. And I'd be a hypocrite now if I said that Mikel Arteta would gamble on a project player. I think the fact that he's signed Reiss Nelson to a new deal suggests that he isn't willing to take a big punt in the wide positions going into the summer, and instead he'd prefer to go with what he knows and with the tried and tested. So I think this one's unlikely. No chance. I think more than unlikely.
No, I agree with you. Moussa Diaby, we've seen links with him far greater than someone like Chukwueze. I'd be tempted to put him in the unlikely rather than no chance, just because of the amount of interest we've heard about him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Really good player. But again, you're talking about a vast amount of money. And again, I don't think that Arsenal are going to commit that kind of. And I want to believe you. I want to fall into that zone of, they're going to go mad on the midfield, which makes it even less likely that they're going to go crazy on a winger. And for me, I know we keep referring to it, but the fact that Reiss Nelson's been signed up says to me that that is not a priority in this window. It may be a priority come January, come the end of next season, but I think with Saka, Nelson, Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Vieira from time to time has played in wide positions. We still got to sort out what's going to happen with Nicolas Pepe. I know he's probably going to leave, but it just feels like we're well stocked in that area. And even, they might even go and get a centre forward and say that Jesus can be one of the wide options as well, which he can do brilliantly too. So I just don't see it as much of a priority as it was maybe 12 months ago.
Sticking on the same thread then, Nico Williams, Athletic Club, young Spanish international. He's got a release clause, which is different to obviously the other players. I think it's 40 million euros, I think is the release clause. What do you make of him?
Again, a little bit raw.
Euros, sorry, the release clause.
A little bit raw. That's just something that jumps out at me when I watch him play. Moments of brilliance, but a little bit raw at times. And yeah, just no, for me, again, no chance on this one.
I think he's a talented kid, really, really, I like him a lot. I'd also put him in no chance. I just think that, I don't think this is the summer that Arsenal go and get Nico Williams. I think they'd probably let him play another season and see if he, comes alive next season before they make a move, which some might say is too late. You need to jump as soon as possible. I've got an issue with the microphone. I'm going to change that quick.
It's buzzing a little bit. It's just buzzing a little bit. Not sure what it is, but I'm sure you can sort it out. But yeah, just quickly on Nico Williams, I like him again. Like you, seen a lot sort of in terms of highlights of him, and always thought this is a guy that can impact games. But just again, unless someone's a great option and a real standout option, and the price makes a lot of sense, then I don't see Arsenal really sort of pushing the boat out on a winger and or on that profile of forward, shall we say? So unlikely for me. And
how's the microphone? No, is it all right now?
Yeah,
is it all right?
Yeah, that's better.
I do tend to agree. I think that it's, as I say, I think it's another season he'll need before Arsenal make a decision on someone like him. Next one is a player that I know you know plenty about, and that's Federico Chiesa of Juventus. Saw links coming out from Gazzetta dello Sport in the week, which immediately made me get my salt shaker out to tell people to give this a grain of salt and take it with a pinch of salt, rather. I'd personally put it in no chance. What about you?
No chance whatsoever. Absolutely love this player, by the way. I think he's an amazing player.
Yeah.
Go back to Euro 2020. Yeah. Go back to Euro 2020, which was obviously played in 2021. And he was unreal. But injuries have just killed him since. There was a sort of mini revival for Federico Chiesa at the back end of the season that's just ended. But you're still not totally convinced by his fitness. He is somebody that Juventus hold in really, really high esteem, really high regard. I know they've got some issues as a football club, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of money to get him out, and it would be a gamble based on the fitness issues and based on the fact that, as I say over and over again, players coming from Serie A to the Premier League is a difficult transition. It's a more difficult transition than coming from Germany, then coming from the Netherlands, then coming from France. I really do believe that. And although he's a throwback, Federico Chiesa, very lively, very direct, and at times looks like he isn't a Serie A player, I just can't see this being one that is worth throwing a lump of money on going into this summer. So no chance for me, although I'd love him to come because I think he's great.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I would love to see Federico Chiesa in an Arsenal shirt, but I don't think it's going to happen. Next one. We move towards more centre-forward style players, and there's not a lot because there's not been too many links that I look at. I've not included the likes of Kolo Muani or Rasmus Højlund in this. I didn't think that they've really materialised at all, unfortunately, because I would quite like Arsenal to move for a centre-forward, actually, this window. El Yawahi, Montpellier forwards, scored a lot of goals in Liga last season. What do you make of this link, and how would you rate it?
No chance. I don't see the logic in this. You've got Following Balogun, who
He's going to go, though.
Yeah, fine, but if you're talking about a young striker who has proven himself in France, you already have one. Surely you would want to try and convince that one that he has a future at Arsenal Football Club, as opposed to going and getting someone with a similar record and who is less known to you and who, in that case, represents a greater risk. To me, this just doesn't make sense.
You on this.
Go on.
I think that the argument will be in the opposite direction, is that Following Balogun wants guarantees that he's a starter. And I think there's a potential that El Yawahi, who is reportedly keen on Arsenal and he likes the club and, sees that as a good step forward, might be more open to being a player that has to fight for his place and recognises that if it gets him that move to Arsenal. So with that, how do you think that changes anything?
I think it obviously, you got a player that wants to come and you got a player that is unhappy and feels like he deserves more. Yeah, of course, it makes sense. If you think that this is the right guy, whatever you sell Balogun for can be put on this guy to come in. So I get the counterpoint, I get the counter argument, but the point I guess I'm making is that, and I've said it throughout this video, I don't want to see us taking gambles right now. I don't want to see us, trying to get players in who maybe in 2 years' time could be ripe and ready enough to do something for us. I think we need solutions for tomorrow. And I don't think this guy is that. I don't think he's more of a solution than Following Balogun is. And I don't think he's more of a solution than Eddie Nketiah is. So to me, you sell Balogun if he wants to go. You cash in because similarly to Joe Willock, where his value reached a peak and was only going to get lower by coming back and not playing, I think we're in that position with Balogun. I think we take the money, but I think we spend it on more of a sure thing. And if I'm saying that, I don't think we're going to get Rice and Caicedo because of the investment. If that can ease that burden and make that a possibility, then I'd rather we spend that money on that than on another unknown quantity at centre forward. It just, to me, this one, this is not a Mikel Arteta signing. This is not a Mikel Arteta and Edu signing, in my opinion, because of the money that we're talking about as well. So, not for me. I think this is no chance. But feel free to disagree. I know a lot of people.
I'm going to put him on unlikely. The only reason I'm not going to put him in no chance, I think the links that we've seen, I think there's some credibility in the interest. So I wouldn't want to entirely rule out that it's not going to happen. But I agree in a lot of what you're saying. And I've asked the question about why you would bring him in with Balogun here. And if you're going to let Balogun leave, I'd rather we spend it on a different profile of centre forward as well. And Wahi's quite similar. He's quite similar to him. So, yeah, I don't necessarily the thing. But I'll put him in unlikely because I think the links are credible. Now, there's only a small matter left, and that's Kylian Mbappe. Now, obviously, we're going to get pelters for including Kylian Mbappe in this. But to be honest, I know that am I right in saying you're going to put him in no chance? But I kind of wanted to just have the discussion about this more than anything because it's quite amusing what's happening at the moment right now.
I would like to put him in unlikely.
Really? You're
Yes.
not going to go for the no chance? Okay,
No,
cool.
I'm not going to go for the no chance. I'd like to put him in unlikely. Look,
Okay.
let's be honest. For me, for years, I've looked at Kylian Mbappe and thought Real Madrid. And I think that's ultimately where he's going to end up, whether that
Yeah,
be
yeah.
this summer or next summer. Don't really know. But Arsenal's status as a football club over the last 12 months has elevated dramatically. We are going out and we are getting a player that is very sought after in the Premier League. I'm not comparing Declan Rice's level to Kylian Mbappe's before people
Yeah,
start.
yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is that we have opened doors to be able to entice players that we couldn't attract 12, 18 months ago because of how much we've progressed. Kylian Mbappe is very, very unlikely, but I want to put him in unlikely rather than no chance as a
Do you know, I love
John.
your contradiction about saying, like, I can't see us spending over 200 million for Caicedo and Rice, and then going, oh, but we might sign.
But
I love it.
Kylian Mbappe
I
is
know what you're
worth
saying.
150 plus million pounds.
Yeah.
Like I could make a case that Declan Rice isn't worth 100 million, and I could make a
Mm.
case that Caicedo isn't worth 80 million, and I think you could make that case, and there would be some legs to it. I think with Mbappe though, he's undisputed, probably the best forward on earth, and so that's different in that sense.
Erling
But
Haaland.
well, I actually think Kylian Mbappe is better than Erling Haaland. I would rather have
What?
Kylian Mbappe
Wow.
because I just think I don't want to say he's more complete. I don't think that's fair on Haaland, but I just stylistically I prefer him. I think he's great to watch. But I want
Yeah.
to put him in unlikely rather than no chance as a tribute, as a testament to how much Arsenal have progressed to the point where it's not going to happen. But why not? Like, why not anymore?
No, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I wrote a piece this morning, which was yesterday when this goes out, and I wrote it with the intention of writing like could Mbappe join Arsenal was kind of the behind the part of the why I was writing it, and I was writing it with the emphasis of the conclusion being I think it can, and then like the more I wrote and the more research I did into the money that's like involved in this deal, it just became so obvious how mad like the finances behind Mbappe's contract is like 650 grand a week is what he boils down to. Not only that, he's getting like 70 million pound a season to stay at the club, loyalty bonuses, like the rights involved in his deal. It's like the money is mad. Like it's absolutely insane.
Well, at
And the
least you don't
thing
have to pay
is,
a sporting director if you get Kylian Mbappe, so you save a bit of
yeah,
money
true.
there
You
as
do
well.
that job. Yeah, Edu, you can do one. We got Mbappe now, but like honestly, it's mad the money involved in that deal. But I love the fact that we haven't got him in no chance because I think it does, as you're right, represent kind of where Arsenal. If Arsenal had have, if we were talking about this last summer, obviously we'd be saying no chance. But like the fact that Arsenal have elevated themselves into a position where even Declan Rice, as a player, is someone that we're going for £100 million supposedly. I think that represents kind of where Arsenal have gone to. But just before we wrap up, obviously what this shows, I think, is obviously the chaos of a transfer window. Of all the players we've discussed, only one of them we think is near as a sure bet as you can get. And even then, there's always the chaos in the market that things can happen quickly and it might not happen. But I think, I'd say at this point we're 90% confident. I think that's probably a fair percentage on Rice, 90% confident that we're hopeful that he arrives at Arsenal this season. But with everyone else, it's like Caicedo's 50-50. I think everyone else is below a 50-50 likelihood at the moment in time. And that's not to say that we don't think that Arsenal are going to get 3, 4, 5 players this season. It's just because the transfer window is so chaotic that it's so impossible to predict really what's going to happen. So what would be your closing statement on our rankings that we've come up with?
My closing statement would be don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything you see on Twitter over the next couple of months because there is a lot of nonsense floating around. There are a lot of aggregators who will pick up every small detail that somebody says on a podcast or in an interview and will just pump
Have you been
tweets out.
picked up as well?
I have a couple
Have
of
you?
times. Yeah,
Oh,
I
mate,
have.
it's so
I
funny.
have. And it's so out of context and it doesn't really make any sense when you only read 2 or 3 sentences of it. There is a lot of that around. And whilst we love the chat and we love the sort of the kind of conversation it creates during a time where there's no football to get your teeth stuck into, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, because if you don't, you will drive yourself mental.
Mm.
You know, how many times have we gone on social media and seen fans jumping up and down at the fact that, you know, why haven't we done this? We heard about this 8 weeks ago. Why is it not done yet? Well, sometimes that's because people guess things as well. And, you know, sometimes people take educated guesses. They are educated guesses. I'm not suggesting that any sort of professional journalist just makes stuff up. But sometimes you want to go that bit earlier, don't you? You want to be the one that brought this story up. And the amount of people I hear who say something because they kind of guessed it and then 6 months later go around telling everyone, well, I was the first to break this story. Relax, man. You guessed something that was pretty obvious and it's come up. And, you know, there's some great people out there, but there's also a lot of the aggregators, which is fine. You know, they're just recycling the news, but just remember they are aggregators and not sources, and they're two different things. And so just keep yourself sane, man. Enjoy the summer, enjoy the sunshine, and kick back until the real stress starts in August, I would say.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, next season, look, it's stressing, it's exciting. I'm really excited for next season, see what Arsenal do. I'm excited for the Champions League to return. It'd be interesting to see if we do one of these tier lists at the end of the window in terms of rating our squads, and looking ahead to the season, perhaps doing some discussions around that. And we'll see, maybe we can look back on this video and see how wrong we were,
Yep.
about certain things. And I'm sure, look, there's going to be names that crop up between now and the end of the window that we weren't even talking about. I'm sure of it. So, yeah, that's also an excitement, because I think what Arsenal have shown is that they do things behind the scenes really well, actually. I know that we play out kind of the big stories in the middle, but actually there's not many clubs out there that sign players out of nowhere, and Fabio Vieira last summer was out of absolutely nowhere. You think back to Kivior in January, that came out of nowhere as well.
Yep.
I remember Callum Chambers leaving, Matt Ryan being announced on the website, no one mentioning that at all. Like, stuff like that is possible at Arsenal, so don't count that out. And I look forward to hopefully seeing, what happens. But Harry, thank you so much for your time, mate. As always appreciated.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure talking Arsenal with you.
Absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Usual live show will resume. We hope you've enjoyed this extended morning show and pre-recorded episode. I hope that the chat box has been good and clean, and I hope people have been managing it very well whilst I've been away. I'm sure I might pop in there now and again. If I'm on the train, I can catch it. But yeah, very much appreciate everyone. Please do drop a like on the video. Please do make sure you go to Harry's channel. Harry, tell people where they can find you.
Yep, head over to the Chronicles of a Gooner. You can find it on YouTube and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Give me a follow at Harry Simi on Twitter, and you can keep across all the different stuff that I'll be doing over the summer. I'm trying to have a bit of a break, but it's not really happened so far. I don't know about you,
I don't know
Tom.
what
You
that is,
probably,
mate.
yeah.
I don't
What
know.
is a break? What is rest? What is this
I
thing?
don't have a clue. No idea. Even when I'm not doing a show, I'm doing a show like these days. It's crazy. Thank you all for listening. Make sure, as Harry says, you go and check out Chronicles of a Gooner. It's a fantastic outlet for Arsenal discussion and chat. Fantastic community there as well. So make sure you join it if you haven't done so already. And follow Harry on Twitter, as he says, at Harry Simia. You can follow myself at Tom Cantamedia or at the Gooner Talk TV. Interesting interview going up later today on football.london. So keep your eyes peeled for that as well. Thank you for listening, everyone. I'll see you again very, very soon. Have a fantastic day. And as always, up the Arsenal.